All right, class. So for this week's lesson, we are going to be learning all about propaganda. So in this lesson, we're going to be learning about what propaganda is and how it is commonly used. So for you, where we went over what persuasive techniques are. So what I want you to do for this slide is to identify what each persuasive technique, each sentence is. So the sentences are, is rain wet? And next one is, and miles before I go to sleep, and miles before I go to sleep. The next one is, a recent study found that students who watch TV during the week don't do as well in school. 80% of people agree that this will change the community for the better. There are thousands of animals at the mercy of our selfishness and disregard for kindness, and your objection will be overruled. So what I want you to do again is just label what each thing is, and you can go back into next week's slide to help you figure out which is which. So the next slide is propaganda class discussion. So you don't have to write anything down for this. I kind of just want you guys to start thinking about it. So like, think about what comes to mind when I say propaganda. Like, what's the first thing that pops in your head? Like, I know for me, it's like old World War II posters for the war that they had, like Rosie the Riveter or like the Uncle Sam thing. Where do you see propaganda around us? I mean, for propaganda, I know for like advertisement wise, like the Got Milk posters, or like kind of like the Nike posters, or like stuff like that, like advertisement posters that you see like around you. Is propaganda a good or a bad thing? I will leave that up to you because that's more of a personal question. But my answer for that was, it depends on how you use it, because there are people that use it for good and people that use it, such as like advertisements, or like kind of just like, for example, you could use the ASPCA commercial where they make you help, like donate to help animals. Where bad things, it could be like using fear tactics to be like, oh, if you text and drive, you're gonna die, or you have a higher risk of death, and you can possibly kill someone. That puts fear into you, and it's just like, oh, well, I guess I won't text and drive, or I won't do this. And then, who uses propaganda and why? So that could be like, again, if we go back to World War II posters, like the government or the military saying, you need to help us. We need help and only you can do it, or you should buy this product because it'll help us with this. All right. So the next slide is just me listing what persuasive techniques used in propaganda are. So name calling, which is negative names are used for the enemy or opposition so that the audience has an emotional response to them and are immediately biased against them. So generalities, linking positive general commonly accepted words such as love, family, democracy, etc. with a person, group, or cause to make the audience approve without careful consideration. Euphemism, so substituting words or phrases for softer, nicer ones to create more of a positive response, or to mislead intentionally, such as senior citizen versus old people, or collateral damage versus citizen death. Then appeal to celebrity or authority, using a well-known personality to endorse a person, group, or cause. And for authority, an appeal to a higher authority to back up the point. Camaraderie, trying to convince the audience that someone is one of them. This helps to convince the audience that they know how they feel, even if they don't. Bandwagon, claiming that the audience should do something because everyone else is doing it. This plays along with people's fear of being left out, so kind of like following a trend. Fear is warning an audience that something horrible will happen to them if they don't take certain actions. And then hyperbole is an exaggeration or exaggerated statement to make a point. So next slide is propaganda examples. So open a Coke, open happiness. So after looking at these persuasive techniques, I would go for generality because it's just like, oh, if you open a Coke, you'll feel happy. Or Coke makes you happy. So that's more of like a general statement. The next is Marilyn Monroe, and it says Marilyn Monroe says, yes, I use Luster Cream shampoo. So that's kind of like influential. She said, well, I'm Marilyn Monroe. I'm a famous actress. You should buy this so you can have hair like me. And then the next two are two war posters. So I want you for the U.S. Army to enlist now, and we can do it. So these are examples of camaraderie because they're pointing, they're kind of like talking to you, or they're talking to a group of people being like, hey, we can do this together. You should join us. This is important to everybody. And then the last one is about cocaine, which is an old documentary film that I found. I found the poster. So bold revealing truth, cocaine, the thrill that kills. The picture is a lesson for every teenager and a warning for every parent. So it's kind of just like, if you watch this film, you're going to see like horrible things about cocaine, and you're going to make your teenagers watch it. They'll never do cocaine, which don't do cocaine, guys. Don't do drugs. All right. So activity 1. So what you're going to want to do for activity 1 is to go to Google Classroom and then open activity 1 in Kami and make a copy in order to complete it. So this is so activity 1. So open with Kami. And I just have to open mine. You're gonna want to rotate it counterclockwise. I don't know why it uploaded the other way. It was kind of weird. So, can you identify persuasive techniques in war posters? So identify and explain how the technique is used in each of the following. At least find one in each. So let's do So let's do number 1 together. So technique used. So remember from when we talked about examples, this poster is about camaraderie because they want you to join them. So for technique used, you would say camaraderie, how they're kind of making a personal connection. And is it effective? Why or why not? Now these parts are like your opinion. So do you find this effective? Why or why not? Then after you complete this activity, you're going to want to do activity 2. Now for activity 2, you're going to want to watch the Animal Farm video, which is right here. So in this video is just a minute summary of the book. You don't have to like research anything about it. This is just like kind of like a background check or background to the next activity that we're going to do. So for activity 2. So watch the Animal Farm video, then go to Google Classroom, then open activity 2 with Kami and make a copy. So for activity 2, it looks like this. So for activity 2, persuasive language being used as propaganda. How propaganda can be used politically to manipulate people is evident in the novel Animal Farm by George Orwell. He shows how those who can use persuasive language can get away with almost anything. The following extract is from the novel. Just after the pigs have stolen the milk and apples, the main protagonist, Squealer, is trying to cover up the pigs' theft using powerful persuasive language. So over here are pretty much the instructions. So can you identify the persuasive techniques that Squealer used? So you're going to want to underline any examples of repetition used in the extract, highlight any examples of rhetorical questions posed by Squealer, circle any outright and outrageous lies which Squealer tells, put a square around or bracket around anytime Squealer pinpoints the enemy, and start any example where Squealer is selective about his information. So for this, here are some examples. So for repetition, many of us dislike milk and apples. I dislike them myself. So he's saying how he dislikes something and repeating how much he dislikes it. Then for highlighting any rhetorical questions, you do not imagine, I hope, that we pigs are doing this in the spirit of selfishness and privilege. So they're kind of saying, like, do you think we're doing this just for our selfishness and privilege? Like, how could you say that? Like, that's kind of just like, remember, rhetorical questions are a question that's not really supposed to have an answer. And then circle any outright or outrageous lies. So our sole objective is taking these things to preserve our health, milk and apples, and in the kind of like parentheses, and this has been proven by science comrades. Well, obviously it hasn't, because where's the science? Where's the research? So this is an outright lie. And then put a square around every time Squealer pinpoints the enemy. So you will see that later in the text, but it's pretty obvious once you read or once you watch the video. And then an example of this is star any selective information. So for this, what I starred is, we pigs are brain workers. Well, how are they brain workers? Like, he doesn't explain it, so he's selective with information that he's telling the other animals. And then after you complete activity 2, you are going to want to do the persuasive poster. Now, the persuasive poster is you're not having a writing prompt this week. You're just doing the poster. So for the poster, I want you to pick a topic, and then what is your central point of persuasion? So an example is, for this poster right here, can I have a puppy, please? So that's like your main point of persuasion is, can I have a puppy? Or I want a puppy. Step 3 is, how would you include the following: ethos, logos, and pathos? Now, remember, ethos is reputation or authority. So you would say, well, I want a puppy because I will train it so that's really kind, trustworthy once it is trained. Or I will clean up after and feed it every single day for a year. So that's like kind of like on your reputation. And then logos is, remember, point of view or reasoning. And pathos is about emotion. So how would you emotionally invoke someone to persuade them to get you so that you can have a puppy? Step 4 is to make sure it's organized and use pictures just so, like, one, to look cool and just so that I know what you're talking about. And then 5, get creative, like pictures, fonts, colors. All right. And remember, we're not having a prompt this week. You're just focusing on the poster. And let's see, you can also look back to, like, when they talk about persuasive techniques, you can also look back into last week's slide, and when ethos, logos, and pathos, you can look back to the week before slide or like watch the video. So yeah, that concludes this lesson about propaganda.